In 2008, the United States of America was in the middle of a big presidential election. This particular election was really important and really historically significant for a lot of reasons, but one of the things that made it so interesting to so many people was just how deeply involved comic books got. The guy who would be elected president, Barack Obama, he was in an interview once and he let it slip that he's a comic book fan. He collects comic books, like, actively. He loves collecting Spider-Man and Conan the Barbarian. And that was exciting. That was exciting for a lot of people, and especially a lot of people in the comic book community. We had Savage Dragon actually officially endorse Barack Obama for president on one of his covers. And then after the election was over, Spider-Man had him on a cover of one of the issues. And then, just 1 month after he was elected, he wasn't even in the office yet, Marvel Comics gave him his first full appearance as an actual character in an actual Marvel comic. And so that's really interesting and that's really exciting. And that's what was going on in the Marvel and independent scene. What we got from DC Comics was something quite a bit different than an official endorsement. What we got was DC Universe Decisions. It's a 4-issue miniseries all about the process of electing a presidential candidate, and specifically how that would be different in a world where superheroes exist. And with Election Day approaching and coming in like a bulldozer, I figured now is the best time, and we're not going to have a better time to delve into this particular miniseries and what it has to say. And I really want to, because I feel like this book has a lot to say about the election process, and it's a great allegory for how it gets influenced in ways that it probably shouldn't be influenced in. Let's hop in, let's start reading. Our story begins at Senator McClellan's presidential campaign rally being held in Ohio. The audience is bustling. People are so excited to be there. There's music playing, there's people shouting, there's people engaging in discourse. And there's also a very subtle click. Almost imperceptible. Imperceptible to everyone, that is. Except for Robot Man. He turns around and there's this woman, her name is Barbara, and she has a bomb strapped to her. She just clicked the button to activate it. Robot Man scatters everyone around and grabs her, trying to keep her from flailing around so that they can disarm the bomb. Secret Service, they jump in on it as well. The candidate is being ushered off of stage as well as most of the people getting out. But suddenly, there's a moment of calm. Barbara relaxes and she looks around and says, "Oh, what am I doing here? I need to go. I need to hurry and get to the rally." Back at the Batcave, Batman and Superman are there with the remains of Robot Man, trying to piece together everything that happened from Robot Man's memory stores. And things are weird. They notice that Barbara doesn't seem to understand what's going on, especially at the point of the explosion. So Batman dispatches Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern, and Oliver Queen, the Green Arrow, to trace the unique chemical compounds out of that bomb to find out its point of origin. And find out they do. They trace it to an abandoned apartment, and what they find there is more terrifying than they could have ever imagined. On the wall, plastered across this whole wall, is a hit list, and every single presidential candidate is on it. Superman calls an emergency meeting of the Justice League to pull everyone together and explain the situation. There's going to be more attacks at these rallies, and there's going to be more people hurt if they don't act fast. So, some of the Justice League members are put onto Batman's detective team, while the rest of them are put on guard duty. Oliver Queen points this out and says, "Hey, I don't like that I'm being voluntold to go talk to a specific candidate. Can I maybe pick which candidate that I bodyguard?" And Hal Jordan calls him out and is like, "Hey, you can't just choose when you're going to do your best superhero work. You're a superhero. You're just going to do your best work regardless of who it is." And Ollie's like, well, of course you would jump to the worst conclusion possible, Hal. No, that's not what it's about. I just don't want to get distracted while I'm on the job. Ultimately, Superman does relent. I mean, Green Arrow's a member of the Justice League, and the Justice League, they don't endorse or promote anything. It's against their rules. And Oliver Queen's going to play by the rules.
When you joined this team, you became something more than just a hero. You became a symbol that represents all of us. We don't play favorites, we don't sell deodorant on television, and we don't get involved in politics.
Yes, sir.
And we certainly don't endorse supervillains for the presidency.
The next day, we find ourselves at a rally for Senator Brewster. Now, Green Arrow is at this particular rally, and because of that, the press, they aren't worried or concerned about the candidate. They're not interested at all in the subject at hand. They're interested in what is Green Arrow doing here? Hey, is this another bomb threat? Is this going to be is this an endorsement? Are you endorsing a candidate? And Green Arrow does his best to backpedal this. He's like, hold on, no, that's not what this is about. This isn't an endorsement. There is no bomb threat. And as soon as he says that, like clockwork, one of Brewster's campaign managers opens up his suit jacket to reveal that he is strapped to a bomb. Everyone starts to panic, everyone starts to run, but not Oliver Queen, not the Green Arrow. He is cool as a cucumber. Pulls out his bow, pulls out an arrow, goes and freezes it with the super freeze, like some kind of ice arrow thing. And it's so sweet. Oh, that's neat. I liked it. That made me excited. Now, after he freezes the bomb and the bomb doesn't go off, he goes up to talk to the campaign manager, and he has no idea what's going on. He's just as confused, if not more confused, than everyone else at that rally. This leads Oliver to come to the conclusion that we're pretty sure he's not acting on his own accord. We're pretty sure that this is the work of somebody else. And he's just enlisting people who have no idea what's going on. As he's escorting the guy out, one of the reporters comes up to him and says, hey, you were super rude to me. And obviously I was right, there was a bomb threat, so you owe me an exclusive. And Ollie's like, okay, fine, I'll relent. I'll show up tonight and give you an exclusive interview. That night, the Green Arrow appears on the evening news, but these reporters, they're out for blood. They are just grilling him with all kinds of crazy questions until eventually he just gets lost in his own words, and he gives a soft endorsement, not really an endorsement, but just a statement of support for Senator Brewster and his campaign. And the reporters in the news studio, they just harp on this half statement that he gives, turning it into this much bigger deal than it ever was or was ever meant to be. Back at their house, we have two more reporters, Clark Kent and Lois Lane. They're watching this on TV, and Lois is kind of baffled by this. She's like, hold on, Clark, is this like a thing now? Are superheroes going to start giving endorsements to candidates? And Superman says, no, obviously we're not going to do that. We're superheroes. We have so much sway over what people have to think and what they have to believe as far as like politics are concerned. And it's not our responsibility to tell people how to vote. It's just our responsibility to be there. And Lois gives him a little bit of light ribbing that Clark won't tell her who he's voting for. But before she can really tease him for too much longer, he gets an alert and he has to book it. He just zooms off to Gotham City, back to the Batcave where Batman is there, and he's analyzing the police footage from the campaign manager that they caught earlier that day. And he's proven it. The campaign manager wasn't acting on his own accord, and likely neither was Barbara. These people, they're just pawns in somebody else's operation. They've got to find out who. We go back to Senator Brewster's offices, and his campaign manager points out something very interesting. After that half-sentence statement that the Green Arrow gave on the news, his poll numbers increased, and it was the most substantial increase they've had the entire campaign season. And he comes up with the idea, hey, if we can actually get Green Arrow to fully endorse and support you as president, you might win this. But if he doesn't do that, we don't see any reason why you could hope to win it. And so Brewster is like, go ahead, you have my blessing. See if you can find him and see if you can get him to agree to this. They find him on top of a hospital as he's doing bodyguard duty on the campaign manager that went crazy the day prior. And they say, look, we know you'd like to help people. I mean, you're in the superhero business. You don't go into the superhero business unless you're interested in helping people. Senator Brewster's promises and his plans, they're going to help people. They're going to help a lot of people. So you can help people by helping Brewster by endorsing him. And the next morning, in his persona as the Green Arrow, Oliver Queen officially endorses Senator Brewster as President of the United States. This opens up all kinds of floodgates. This is Pandora's box, Ollie. Why'd you open this? Back at the Watchtower, Hal Jordan is watching all this. He's like, what in the world are you doing, Ollie? This is ridiculous. This is stupid. This is so stupid. You have so much sway over people's thinking and their opinions. Why'd you do this? And Oliver's like, well, because I believe in him. And I'm kind of annoyed that you don't share the same opinion. And then words get thrown around, fists get thrown around, they start beating on each other until Black Canary shows up and has to split them apart. And it just gets crazier and crazier. Meanwhile, Batman and Superman aren't super excited that Ollie did this, because that just kind of started getting other people to want to endorse other candidates, and they started doing it already. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Lois is in the offices of Perry White at the Daily Planet, and he says, look, you've been asked to join over on the TV team and cover the TV angle of the election. She doesn't want to do it. She's in the middle of investigating the bombs. She's in the middle of investigating all of the candidates. She doesn't have time for TV, but her story gets pulled out from under her and she has to go to the TV team. She gets over to the TV team, and none of them are really all that interested in talking about the bombings or the election itself. They're really interested, though, in which superheroes are supporting which candidates, because that is great TV. Their ratings have been going up ever since they've been exposing that. Lois is a great journalist. She doesn't want to do it, but she's going to do her best to fulfill this mandate. And she gets an endorsement out of almost every single C-list superhero out there on the list. But now the question comes, after we've gotten all of the C-listers, what about the top three? Who do Batman, Wonder Woman, and Superman endorse? The next day, we're at a rally for Senator Ridgway, another candidate for president, and a bunch of the superheroes are at this one, but now, since they've all been giving endorsements, they're all talking a lot more openly about the campaign and what they think of each of the candidates. And out of the corner of her eye, Power Girl notices another person in the audience with a bomb strapped to them. And so she flies in there and she grabs the woman, and Hal Jordan is there as well, and he uses his ring to help dismantle the bomb off of her vest. But while the superheroes are distracted by the bomb, one of the Secret Service agents pulls out his gun and aims it directly at the candidate. The rest of the Secret Service, they hop into action. One jumps in front of the bullets to try and stop them from hitting the candidate, while the other ones pull out their guns and take down the rogue agent. The guy who jumped in front of the bullets, he's fine. Most of the bullets hit the Kevlar and got one in the arm. But the rogue agent, he wasn't as lucky. Superman arrives on the scene, and he's trying to keep everybody calm, and they're trying to keep the crime scene intact so that Batman can arrive and he can do his analysis. But Batman's going to be a little bit late, because on the other side of town, Bruce Wayne has just endorsed Senator Suarez for president. And then the next morning, Wonder Woman endorses Ridgway. So, everyone is endorsing all kinds of different candidates. And while all of this is going on, Superman speeds off to Senator Suarez's rally. Because with his X-ray vision, he was able to see that there was another bomb at this rally. And this bomb was inside a briefcase, and this briefcase belonged to Suarez. And the briefcase was placed underneath the stage by Suarez himself. Superman rips open the stage and he finds the briefcase and holds it against his chest to let it explode harmlessly against him. And when everything has calmed down a little bit, Lois Lane runs up to him with a microphone. Superman, who are you going to endorse for president? And she stuffs the microphone in his face and he says, I don't have a comment at this time. Sorry. And he takes off and flies away. And the Flash comes in and takes a spot at the microphone and says, hey, not cool, guys. There's so much more going on here. Look, how about this? If I endorse the bomber for president, will you guys actually start paying attention to what's actually going on here? Good idea, Flash. Except the news takes this and turns it into the headline, The Flash Mocks U.S. Elections. Not quite the effect we were hoping for, bud. Now, back at the Batcave, Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman are compiling all the clues that they've received so far about who is behind all of this. So we know that they control other people, and the other people they control don't have any recollection of what's going on until afterwards. We also know that whoever's controlling them can't control them at the time that they die. Otherwise, he would have gotten to them ahead of time, would have killed them quietly rather than out in the open like that. So, Batman has the eureka moment. They're not being mind controlled, they're being possessed. And with that last piece of information, they were able to figure out who the bad guy is. And the trap is set. It's the last day before Election Day, and we're at the final rally. And all of the superheroes are there in force. The entire Justice League is there for this trap. Superman flies through the center of the arena and lands next to the press box. Miss Lane, may I have a word with you? On the record. It occurs to me that I owe you an apology for the short shrift I gave you the other day when you were just doing your job. Even in desperate situations, you deserve better treatment. And America deserves a more candid answer to your very fair question. While he's taking all of the attention as the distraction, Hal is able to clock that the bad guy is 5 feet away from Superman. Once he hears this over the comms, he turns around, grabs the perpetrator, and he's suddenly attacked by some kind of psychic ability that it has to muscle through. The rest of the Justice League, they hop in there, and they're chasing this guy back and forth as he's transferring his presence between person to person to person, until eventually he's able to take Hal Jordan. The bad guy's done it. He's taken control of Hal Jordan, likely the most powerful of the Justice League. He's creating all of these constructs to attack not just the candidate, but the people, the audience as well. The Justice League has their hands full, while Secret Service is doing the best they can to get the candidate out and away from their arena. But they just can't move fast enough. By the time they get to the exit, Hal Jordan is already there with this evil grin on his face and his ring powered up and ready to cause destruction. What the bad guy didn't count on is that Hal Jordan has the strongest will in the universe, and when it comes to a battle of will, Hal will win every single time. He kicks the bad guy out of his own body, and the Justice League are able to capture him. Turns out it's this guy named Jericho. I don't know who he is. I don't know who this guy is.
Character profile, Jericho. Identity, Joseph William Wilson. Creators, Marv Wolfman, George Perez. First appearance, Tales of the Teen Titans number 43, June 1984. Affiliation, Titans West, occasionally works independently. Processing power set. Jericho, also known as Joseph Wilson, possesses a rare metahuman ability, psychic possession. This enables him to take over the bodies of other beings through eye contact. Once inside, Jericho gains complete control over his host's actions, speech, and even physical abilities. Alert: psychological risk analysis of Jericho's power set. Warning: prolonged and repeated possessions have introduced a significant psychological risk factor for Jericho. Each possession allows his psyche to absorb residual traits, emotions, and even toxic behaviors from those he controls. This phenomenon, termed cognitive imprinting, has occasionally led Jericho to adopt the darker impulses and complex, morally ambiguous traits of his hosts. Precaution: Jericho's psychological state should be monitored closely after each possession to mitigate long-term effects on his mental health. Use with caution. Database file updated. Exiting.
Turns out that after taking possession of enough people, Jericho's kind of gone a little bit crazy. He's taken on a ton of toxic traits from a ton of people, and that kind of led to him wanting to destroy the presidential race. But, I mean, they caught the bad guy, they solved the problem with the bombings, but there's a much bigger problem still out there. The superheroes have taken the focus off of the election, and they've swayed too many opinions. Superman goes back to the Daily Planet, finds Lois and says, "Lois, I want to give you an exclusive interview on camera. I want to explain everything to you and to the world." It is my hope that the focus of this election will now return to the issues and the candidates who will address them. And with that, I do feel compelled to answer a question that has been posed to me. Who do I wish to see as the next president of the United States? I do have a choice. There is one amongst these 4 fine elected officials who I believe will best lead this nation, but it would be unconscionable of me to share that with you, as I feel it has been wrong for any of us who battle injustice, we so-called heroes, to allow our opinions to be known on this most important of occasions. To begin, whoever is elected to the highest office of the land should not think that they will not have our full support, that our allegiances are stronger with a defeated candidate. We don't take sides. The battles we fight are larger than those on the political spectrum. It would pain me to think the president could believe that he or she couldn't count on us, turn on to us, or rely on us. But most important, for us to involve ourselves in this election, in any election, betrays you, whom we have dedicated ourselves to serve and protect. There's an unspoken covenant between you and us. You allow us to serve outside of the laws of any land. Our actions are governed by no one. We are given no reward for our success or penalty for our failure. You understand, we have always understood, that our mission is to protect not only this nation, but this world, all the worlds beyond the stars. We answer to no one, therefore we do not govern. We are heroes, and we serve. The privilege of choosing who will lead you is, I believe, a sacred right, one that should forever remain unmolested. You choose, you decide, and always we will protect. It's now election day. That afternoon, Lois and Clark, they go off to the polls, and they cast their votes. So, who'd you vote for? Stop. I already voted. You're not going to sway me, Boy Scout. Who'd you vote for? You hungry? I'm hungry. Who? Deli? Sure, I could go for Deli. Who? Stop asking, or I'm just going to fly away, okay? Who? And then a nice little reminder to make sure that you vote on November 4th. So when IGN was reviewing this book, they gave it an awful ranking, meaning that they thought the book was awful. And when they were explaining why, they said it was because the series never told you who to vote for, never told you what the right choice was as far as the issues were concerned, and it never told you what actually the superheroes were voting for or against. But you know what? I think IGN missed the point by pointing right at the point and then just not acknowledging it. Because the point was never to tell you about the actual politics. The point was never to make a stance. The point was to tell you that, you know, there's a lot of people out there who shouldn't be making this stance. Or at least shouldn't be influencing your vote anyway. Because yeah, I get it. None of the senators that are running for president, they never elaborate on what they're thinking as far as their plans. The most they say is, I have a program that's going to help with a thing. Woohoo! Neat. They don't tell you anything more than that. And on top of that, when we're getting all the superhero endorsements, they don't give any statements more or less than, the average man on the street interviews that you see online all the time. They don't go deep into it because the point wasn't the politics. The point was the people reacting to the politics and what that meant. This isn't a book about who to vote for. This is a book about why celebrity endorsements are fun, but they don't mean anything. They only distract you from the actual events. Because, look at this. The main story doesn't start until Oliver Queen gives his soft endorsement of his candidate. The bombing is the setting. The story is that action. That's the inciting incident. And the whole time, the superheroes are pointing out, look, the press, they're not doing the right thing here. They're focusing on the wrong tidbits of information. They're not focusing on the bomb. They're not focusing on the candidates. They're not focusing on the actual stances anyone's taking. They're not focusing about the issues. They're focusing on which superhero can be more impressive than the next. And that's not to say they don't make a statement about the politicians. Right after Green Arrow gives his endorsement, the only thing we ever see any of the other candidates do is try to get a more impressive superhero than someone else to get to endorse them. I mean, heck, the biggest B-plot in this story is about how Lois Lane has to give up her actual journalist job investigating the actual issues as represented by the bombings, and turn around and get fluff pieces off of superheroes, which superheroes are voting for who. And then when the Flash makes a point of this, when he points at this and says, hey, you guys aren't doing the right thing here, what do? They turn that into a headline. I don't know if I've talked about it here before, but if I have, then, that's cool. If I haven't, then I'm about to right now. See me adjust the camera right there? That was pretty sweet, huh? When I was going through high school and a little bit beyond, I was very, very invested in working in journalism. I loved the school newspaper. Not only that, I worked on the TV news as well, and I wrote for papers locally and statewide all through high school and then past high school a little bit. I was good at it. But I remember there was one day when I heard a news story and it got so slanted by the time it traveled across the country, and it got so full of commenter opinions rather than the actual facts that I realized I didn't want to go into that anymore. So that background kind of sits fresh in my mind when I'm reading this book, because that's what a lot of this is. It's criticism of how journalists and newspapers and TV, how they'll focus on parts of the election that really don't matter because it's more entertaining. It gets people's attention in a little bit less of a serious way, and it's easier to swallow it. And I liked how the characters interacted with each other a lot, there's obviously Clark and Lois. I'm really biased. I love Superman. I don't know if you guys can tell. Superman is my favorite. But I loved how Lois and Clark interacted with all of the events that are happening here, especially when Clark points out that as both a superhero and a journalist, he has no room to be telling people what to do with their vote, because he has way too much influence over what people should and shouldn't do and shouldn't think. But then you know what else? Green Lantern and Green Arrow. That was cool. I loved seeing Green Lantern and Green Arrow do their thing. It was great. Now, those who are big fans of either of those characters will likely know this already, but back in the 70s, there was a storyline that's just been dubbed Hard Traveling Heroes in that time and beyond, where this is silly. So the publisher mandate was, hey, they both have green in the name, maybe they'll make a good combo book. And so they said to Dennis O'Neil and Neil Adams, who were supposed to be making the book, hey, make a combo book with Green Lantern and Green Arrow. It'll be fun. They're both green. Woohoo. And they're like, well, that's kind of silly. You have one who's like a street level vigilante and the other one is Green Lantern. I don't know. But they did it. And what they decided to do was they made them go on a road trip where they slowly went across America and they hit up every single hot button issue that the 70s had. We actually know a lot about the politics of Green Arrow and Green Lantern because they discussed it during the 70s on this big road trip that was really, really successful, story-wise and business-wise.
Hey, we should take a road trip.
What?
Think about it. 2 hard-traveling heroes cruising the countryside looking for America.
Yeah, I'll let you know when my schedule frees up.
Oh, I look frustrated in that, don't I? Bleh. That's because I was frustrated. And I think it's also worth pointing out that while the other publishers were just releasing really one-sided and mostly reactionary comics to tie into the election, this came out before the election and did a really, really good job of not picking one party and choosing them as right or wrong. Not to say I don't have problems with this book. I do have some particular issues with this book. For one, Jericho was supposed to be the big bad guy by the end of it, but it was never hinted at, and it didn't feel like they built up to it. Because, I guess you could look at it in a way where they said all the suspects possible were everybody in DC, but that's a lot. And I think it's the mark of a good detective story when you can set it up in such a way to where people could potentially figure out the answer before the end of the book using the clues that you provide. And this almost does it, except that Jericho kind of just comes out of nowhere. He's never brought up before in the book. He's never mentioned. No one ever briefly says, hey, I wonder how Jericho's doing. He's never brought up. Unless you had a really solid beat on everyone at DC Comics, you're probably not going to catch it. And the problem is, this is a short miniseries. It's 4 issues, and it's not very action-packed. So you only had the detective stuff going for it, and you didn't set it up well enough to where it didn't feel like it paid off. Also, this book takes place only 2 years after Infinite Crisis, and it reads like it only took place 2 years after Infinite Crisis. Oh, there's things to explain about that.
And now it is time for a very, very abridged version of a very, very abridged history of DC Comics and how silly/serious they wanted to be at any given time. We start off with the early days in the Golden Age, where DC Comics ultimately did make fairly serious stories. And we had scary elements of them, we had big detective elements of them. They were really cool, and they were really great, and people loved them. But then Congress showed up, the literal Congress of the United States of America, and said, no, we don't like this. We think this is too scary. You gotta self-censor this, or we're going to. And the route DC Comics decided to go with was to make everything a comedy. And so they added a lot more comedy to things, but it also meant that there were a lot of elements to the universe and to the overall story that could only happen because they were being a little bit more silly and a little bit more outlandish. But the thing was, the people who grew up with the more serious version of DC Comics really, really liked that and really missed having the more grounded tone. And so, we got Crisis on Infinite Earths. The whole point of Crisis on Infinite Earths was to reboot DC Comics, the whole universe, the whole ongoing story, to be a bit more grounded, to be a lot more serious. And the way they did that was they brought in different writers and different artists. They still kept the old ones. So we got this really cool synthesis where we still had some of those elements, but
overall, we were a lot more serious and a lot more grounded in the storytelling. However, now the fans of the sillier Silver Age stuff were getting old enough to where they were writing the comics. And they missed a lot of the elements that could only exist in this more silly version of the universe. This less grounded version of the universe, we probably could say. Some compromises were made and some elements of the more silly version of the universe were brought back. And they still did a pretty good job overall of keeping the serious tone of the universe that they had set. Everything still fit. But more and more people who grew up with this version of DC Comics were coming up and were writing the books. And eventually this meant we got Infinite Crisis. A big part of what it was supposed to be doing was taking elements that existed from before Crisis on Infinite Earths and bringing them back to the universe as it currently stood. They couldn't get rid of all of the serious stuff that Crisis on Infinite Earths added into the universe and what that reboot did, because frankly, that reboot was extremely successful and people liked it, but they did bring back a lot of those elements. And this became the de facto version of DC Universe for a very, very, very long time. This became a very nostalgic and very centric version of DC's aesthetic. This was the balance that they achieved from seriousness and silliness, and I don't love it. So there were some of the tropes that really bothered me about this are like how Batman has a real bad case of smartest guy in the room syndrome. Like almost every time somebody's in the Batcave and talking to him, he has the answer figured out, and he just like pulls out the answer and he's like, hey, buddy, look, I have the answer. Come on, you can do it. Just exercise your brain just a little bit more. You can get there. Oh, look at you. You got the answer right. And he does this a couple of times and he's insufferable for it. And that's just how Batman was at this time. He's like, I'm the world's greatest detective and that's my whole personality now. And it drove me nuts. And on the same wavelength of thinking, the Superman more than he should. He's usually written pretty well in this book. But there were a couple of times where he fell victim to big dumb guy with muscles, and that's not who he is. You don't become an investigative journalist by not being very smart. You become an investigative journalist because you're a dang good detective. But no, they don't focus on that. They just focus on him being this big and tough. And then the Watchtower, guys. Oh my gosh, the Watchtower. And then the Watchtower has all of this weird Justice League branding all over it, which it doesn't look cool. It looks like a kid's playset. It looks like I'm watching action figures in a playset talking about this. And that's silly, but I don't even think I like the Watchtower in general. It's a little too... The idea of a giant space station where citizens and superheroes alike are teleported up and down all the time and they're constantly monitoring the whole world with it, that's a little too outside of the realm of believability for the stories that I like to read involving guys in tights and capes who shoot fire out of their eyes and women who have lassos that make you tell the truth and guys who dress up as bats and hang out with gods. I know. It's one of the few hypocrisies I'm okay with living with. But the setting just isn't as grounded as I would like. And I know that that's a personal gripe. I don't know if that's really a critique on the book itself, but it is worth mentioning. Because, like I've mentioned, some of the characters act in a certain way that might rub you the wrong way. So, would I recommend this book? That's tricky. Because... unlike something like Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games, there's not much reason to revisit it between 4-year stints. I think it's a great representation of the election process from the point of view of journalists and people trying to receive information. And that's cool and that's unique, and I really like that, and I think that's worth exploring. Though I can see IGN's point where they would want something a little bit more set as far as policies and opinions on policies, but tons of comic books already do that. Comic books have always been political in that way. If you want to read something that has really great liberal versus conservative conversation and discourse, you need to read Marvel's Civil War. That's really the best that you're going to get. But as far as, other things, if you want to read something that talks about the election but doesn't get bogged down by controversy and differing opinions like that, this is a fascinating read. And it delves into a part of the election process that we don't talk about as much. How celebrities and influencers influence elections, but then asks the question, should they? Should their opinion matter at all? And it's hilarious. While I'm making this, when I was filming it, the original Avengers had a reunion, like the movie. The actors had a reunion so that they could make an endorsement video. That's literally what this book is about. It's like, oh, look at that, serendipity. That's fun. So as far as collecting is concerned, this is a 4-issue miniseries, and it's never going to get collected in a trade. It hasn't been, and it's not going to be. It was released in 2008, guys. It doesn't get more or less relevant than that in the eyes of publishers. It's not going to get reprinted. But I did find all 4 issues for less than $1, like in total. These cost less than $0.25 a piece. If you go to your local comic shop and you search through the discount bin for like 3 minutes, you're going to find this. I found so many duplicate copies in those boxes. Like, this isn't a hard one to collect, and it's not an expensive one either. So, overall, yeah, I think it is worth picking up. I think it is worth seeking out and trying to get because it's kind of special. It fills a unique space in political discourse that comic books don't look at. And not only do comic books not look at it, the news would never be this self-critical, and neither would any of the candidates. For that reason, I love this book. And I love what it's doing and what it's trying to say. So that's what I got for you guys today. Thank you for joining me on this little adventure through time and space and whatever else. It was cool. Now, this is my obligatory reminder to let you know that you need to go out there, you need to vote. Vote with your conscience. Vote for the candidate you think is going to do the best job. Take advantage of this beautiful process that we have to elect our leaders. Comment below what you thought of this video, what you thought of this comic, and until next time. Thank you for joining me. Have a great day, and remember to always be your best self.